Hi.
How are you, Magda?
Good, good. This is good. My kids left. My house is back in order.
What? Now it's all quiet?
It's in order. It's the order. It was all this.
I know. I know, because Carolyn was here last week, and at her house, she's like OCD. Everything's exactly in place. Come to my house, Esther.
What is that? I know. I know.
I don't know.
But the kids are cute and it's nice that they're there.
The kids are cute, right? Right. The kids are cute. Yeah.
Where is Ernie? Is Ernie in Israel?
No, he's here. He was in
Oh.
Israel
But he was in Israel.
for a week.
Shavuot
Shavuot Tov.
Hello, Magda and Harold.
Oh, how come we don't hear you?
Okay, there you go.
Hello, everybody. Come on in.
There we go. Okay.
How's your grandma doing?
What's wrong? What's wrong with your equipment?
Okay.
Faggy, there's something wrong with your.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, go ahead. Turn it on.
How do you,
It's on. Set it. It's 73. It's on.
this?
Harold, you didn't have enough in Shalashudes?
I don't eat that. Can't eat that stuff. Didn't look appetizing.
No.
Is the sound working?
Hmm?
Oh, good. Okay. I was sure the sound was working. Okay.
Hi, Shavuot Tov.
Shavuot Tov. Shavuot Tov, everybody. Let's just get all my material here. We're on Perek Gimel. We finished with Big Son Vaseresh and Mordechai revealing assassination plot.
Can you get your other book?
No, I just want to open this up here. Susan, could you move that, please? Thank you. Achar hadvarim ha'eleh. After these things, Gidala melech Achashverosh Achashverosh the king raised up as Haman ben Hamdasa Agagi, Haman ben Hamdasa the Agagi, Vainaseyu, advanced him. Vayasem es kiso, me'al kol asrim asher ito. He made him the first officer, like the prime minister. Rashi, on the spot, says, Achar advarim ha'ela. What dvarim? Shenivras refuah zu lios l'tshula Mordechai. This happens, right? Megillah Yud Gimel Amud Beis. Achar shehigdim HaKadosh Baruch Hu refuah l'Makkah. For Klal Yisrael, many times, HaKadosh Baruch Hu plans the treatment before it gives you the klap. Shenosa Achashverosh es Esther. What happened? What is Achar Advarim Ha'ela? This is Perek Gimel. What did we deal with in Perek Beis? The beauty pageant and Achashverosh marrying Esther. Well, having Esther in the palace is one refuah for the eventual makkah. Number two, v'nichtav b'sefer divrei Mordechai. The immediate psukim prior to Achar Advarim Ha'ela describe the attempted assassination by Bigsan Vaserish. Mordechai, who understood their language, reveals it, and it's recorded in the name of Mordechai that he was the one who saved Achashverosh. And later on, Balaylahu Nadadash Nasa Melech, that's when the whole story shifts. So that's the refuah before the makkah. By the way, there's the Gemara Megillah gives a source for this. How do you know me? Achar Mai. Well, after what? Amar Rav. Achar Shabar Kadosh Baruch Hu Refuah L'Makkah. First, HaKadosh Baruch Hu creates the refuah. The Amar Reish Lakish, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu Makkes Yisrael, El Im Kein Bor Lehem Refuah Tchila. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu does a makkah, he always creates a refuah. Comes into my mind, the displaced persons in the DP camps after the Holocaust. They had a place to go. They had Eretz Yisrael. You're talking about 600,000 people were eventually brought as DPs to Eretz Yisrael. It took 50 years for the Yishuv to create a makom that after the terrible makkah, there was a place that unfortunately, it didn't serve because of the British white paper as it could have been, where all of the population could have perhaps been saved in Eretz Yisrael. But it was a refuah that already the groundwork for it had been laid 50 years before. The conference, the first Zionist Congress in Basel was 1897, 50 years prior. I don't know. I was thinking about that. The Gemara says, Shenemar and Hosea, Kirofil Yisrael, V'rak achar klach v'niglav on Ephraim. First, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the rofa for the Jewish people. Then, he has to pay back for the avonis. He says, Aval umas ha'olam eino kain. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu strikes the umas ha'olam, he makeh otam v'achar kach borelem refuah. As it says in Yeshayahu, the Nogaf Hashem es Mitzrayim, Nagof v'rafo. The refuah comes after the makkah. By the way, the Gra in it also says, what's the Achar Advarim Ha'ela? Shemamuchan zeh Haman. Right, we had a debate when we mentioned the 7 Sarim who gave the advice to Achashverosh to kill Vashti. It was Mamuchan. Well, so there was one approach that Mamuchan is somebody else, but the Chazal Amru in Megillah Yud Beis Amud Beis so Mamuchan zeh Haman. Va'atzato hayah la'rogetz Vashti. It was his advice to kill Vashti. וגם שיהיה יכולת ביד המלך לשפוט דבר נוגע בו. And remember, usually the king could not make a decision on his own. He had to go, if he's going to execute somebody, he had to go to the other officers, but it changed. שאם לא היה יכול לשפוט בעצמו, היה קשה מאוד לעשות משפט בסורם הגדולים. So that allowed, eventually, when Achashverosh gives a command to kill Haman, it's carried out, because prior to that, so that's part of the Gra is explaining, that's the Haman gave the advice to kill Vashti so that they got Esther in the place. And Memuchan created the environment where the king could paskin on his own without a problem.
Was for these. Oh, it's the eighth camp. Eighth camp. It's for the men.
Yeah, we can hear you, Walter.
Okay, sorry.
Okay. The Medrash said that a Kodesh Baruch Hu, Haman was one of the people that went to Yerushalayim to stop the building the Beis Hamikdash. We had that in Midrashim. And if Kodesh Baruch Hu is going to patch him for doing that, nobody knows who he is. So there's an issue of Gidal Haman. Haman was raised, became famous. Then when you hang someone like that, the nace is bigger. Of course, the word Agagi we discussed is he is a descendant of Agag. So that's why he's called the Agagi. Shaul HaMelech preserved Agag's life for one night. He had relations with a Shifcha, and that gave birth to eventual Haman. The next day, Shmuel HaNavi killed him. So just that delay led to the creation of Haman. By the way, Haman was the second richest person who ever lived in the world. The first person, Koirach. We say Reich vi Koirach. And Haman had stolen all the various oitzrois that had been stolen from the Nebuchadnezzar. Okay, I just
And
want
I
to make
point
sure.
out two interesting points made in the Mayam Lois. The first is that you remember he had advisors. Every day of the week there was a different advisor. He was the youngest of them and the lowest ranking until this happened when he was elevated to become the chief advisor. That's number one. And the second one is an interesting analysis of the Megillah. That his Haman lasted in power at this level for 70 days between the time of Achashverosh elevating him to the time when he was hanged. There's exactly 70 psukim from here until it says the pasuk having to do with Haman being hanged. So that's just
Very interesting. Very interesting. By the way, let's position where we are. What is this achar? The Ibn Ezra says this is achar chamesh shonim. That Esther nasta malka b'shna sheva lamelech. In the 7th year of his reign, that's when Esther became queen. V'aman hiti legor laberes Yehudim b'shna 12 lamelech Achashverosh. The lottery that Haman did was in the 12th year. So it's 5 years has gone back. And yes, the Ibn Ezra says it was 70 days from the day until he was hanged. Yes. By the way, the Bigson Viserys episode happened right after Esther became king, after she became queen. And therefore, that's why over the time it could be completely forgotten what Mordechai had done. By the way, this money that I told you, he had so much money. If you remember, at the end of what happens after they hang Mordechai?
Not Mordechai.
After they hang Haman, what happens in Perek Chet? It says they bring all of base Haman to Mordechai. So eventually, all the riches that Haman had was given later on to Mordechai. They used that money to build Bayis Sheni. The Medrash says that a third of the money went to Mordechai and Esther, a third went to the people studying Torah, and a third went to the Binyan Beis Hamikdash. That's when it says, "Vatasem Esther es Mordechai beis Haman." Haman had found the Oitzrois of the Malchei Yehuda, and eventually it's returned to Mordechai, and through Mordechai, they used the money to build Bayis Sheni. Remember, what did we say? Haman's whole machshava was to stop the building of the Beis Hamikdash. And this whole story leads to the financial support of how you rebuild Bayis Sheni. The Gemara says in Sanhedrin, Lamed Vav, Mibnei Bonav Shel Haman Lomdu Tor B'Bnei Brak. And some want to say that is because of the schus of the money that eventually came from Haman to the Binyan Beis Hamikdash is why his great-grandchildren were zoicha to learn Torah in Bnei Brak. Of course, we know that Mechias HaMolek always comes before Binyan Beis Hamikdash, like it was in the times of David HaMelech, where they had to wipe out Amalek first. So another reason why Haman appears in this story. Pasuk Beis. V'chol avdei HaMelech asher b'shar HaMelech korim u'mishtachavim laHaman. The king's servant, there was a command that everyone in the employ of the king had to bow down to Haman. Kichein sivalo HaMelech. That was an order from the king. But Mordechai lo yichrav lo yishtachaveh. But Mordechai did not bow down. Rashi, she'asa atzmo Eloha. Rashi quotes the Megillah Yud Amud Beis. He made himself personally into an idol to be worshipped. Lefichach Mordechai lo yichrav lo yishtachaveh. Rashi has to say this. Mordechai is a courtier, right? Mordechai is appointed by Achashverosh through Esther's advice. Remember we said last week, he's judging the people in the shar of Amelech, and he's a courtier. He has to go along with everything. If it's just the bowing and scraping as an official, so we find many times. We just had this week's parsha. Yaakov bowed down. I'm going to read you a medrash soon about that. But there we see by Avram, he had certain relations with the people around him. There was bowing, and we see Yaakov bowing to Esav, etc. So Rashi has to bring the point that, and of course, the not bowing led to the anger of Haman, which led to a decree to wipe out the Jewish people. So what was Mordechai doing? So Rashi is pointing out from the Gemara that number one, he made himself into a god. We're going to see other sources that say he wore like a statue. That's number one. Number two, you notice it says a double language. Korim u'mishtachavim. Where does that language echo in all of your ears? Aleinu l'shabeach. V'anachnu korim u'mishtachavim.
Kippur. Yeah.
V'aleinu. V'anachnu korim u'mishtachavim. That means hishtachava alone is something that, you went to Queen Elizabeth and there was a curtsy, right? There's protocol in front of royalty. So that is not necessarily forbidden. But korim u'mishtachavim is clear evidence that this is being done al avodah zarah. That's how the Meforshim, the Malbim, everyone brings that. Right, the Medrash says he fastened an idolatrous character onto his clothing, so that when they bowed to him, it made sure that they were also worshiping in Avodah Zarah. Haman had a lot of gaiva. He wanted kriya and ishtachava based on his gaiva. He understood that this normally is only done to God. Now, Haman eventually realizes that Mordechai's refusal to bow down is religiously motivated. And that's what leads to Haman wanting to punish the whole Jewish people. It's their religion.
Listen, hello. Are you going to talk about the Targum? It says that Mordechai and Haman were in the army during Achashverosh's reign in the city of Himdika that rebelled against him. And
Yes.
You know that?
Here, let's learn that.
Okay.
Good point to learn it. This is based in the Gemara and the Medrash. Haman was the Avdo Shel Mordechai, Shenim Karlo. Haman technically was an Evet to Mordechai. This is the story. In the year 3,393, remember we say in the beginning of the Megillah that Achashverosh had 127 provinces. From where? Mehodu ve'ad Kush. India is Hodu until Kush is Africa. So one of the provinces in India rebelled against Achashverosh. Ve'amelech Achashverosh shalach yud beis elef chayalim l'sham. Achashverosh sent 12,000 soldiers, lachnias hamordim, to put down the rebellion. Uverosh kol hatzava hazeh hamid beis haretzav Mordechai v'Haman. Mordechai and Haman are both important courtiers in the court of Achashverosh. So naturally, he sends both of them as military officers to lead this army. V'hem chilku beinehem hamachanot. Haman and Mordechai divided this 12,000 man army. Shekol echad pakad al sheishes alofim ish. Each ruled over 6,000. V'amelech natan lahem tzedav kesef. The king, of course, provided them with provisions, food, money. Mordechai and Haman divided them equally. Each one was given sufficient provisions for his army. There was enough food for 3 years. Excuse me. They laid siege to a city. Mordechai was on the east. Haman bizbeis kol hakesef v'atzeda at shekala hakol l'sof shana. Haman was not a good organizer, and in 12 months, Haman had no more money and no more food to provide for his 6,000 soldiers. Aval Mordechai lo bizbeis b'li cheshbon. Mordechai was a good accountant. Haman comes at the end of the year, sees that the battle is going to go on more. I don't have any money left. We're all going to die of hunger. The king gave us specific amount of money for 3 years. You had to provide food for your people, not for my people. Now you got rid of everything. So basically Mordechai is telling him, I don't know how to help you. Loan me, make me a loan with interest. I'll pay you back double. I can't do it. If I give you from my food, how am I going to give my own soldiers food? And the other answer he said, I'm from the Bnei Yaakov, you're the Bnei Esav, we're brothers. And it says in the Torah, Lo sashich lachicha Neshech kesef neshech ochel. You can't charge interest to your brother. The soldiers of Haman came trying to get food, and he didn't have to give him. They wanted to kill him. Haman goes to Mordechai, and he says, loan me money, massive interest, I'll give you 10 times. So he says, so Mordechai again refuses, I can't do it. I can't pay you interest. But here's the key point. Sell yourself to me as an eved. One day out of every week, whatever earnings you do will come to me. And I'll feed your soldiers. Haman had no other way. He sold himself. They found a paper, lichtov boshtar mechira, to write a formal sale contract, v'lomatzu. So Mordechai took a copper tablet. You put them on your feet as a soldier to protect your legs. And the star said, Ani Haman ben Amdosa mizera agag moide sheshalach osi hamelech lichboshir haYehudim ubinau oto al sheish hahoidim ubinau oto al sheish alfim chaylim, and I was appointed. He gave the whole story, and he loaned it to me, and now I'm his eved. By the way, you notice there's.
How did he solve his problem? How is he going to have enough food for his soldiers now?
So all of his soldiers were fed by Mordechai's Seidah and Kesef.
Yeah, but Mordechai would said that if he sells himself as an eved, so then he'll feed some of his soldiers. So how did he feed before? He couldn't feed both of them. Now suddenly he can.
I guess they have to survive on half rations.
Mordechai, through more careful logistics, was able to feed, but he had to pay. Haman had to pay Mordechai for it. He didn't have, just like when a Jew owes money, he's sold as an eved ivri, an indentured servant. Same thing was Haman did. Now remember, Haman's a goy, so he sold himself mamish as an eved. Now you notice
the goy. Why couldn't he take the interest?
To Esav and Yaakov stealing the Bechoira a little bit. Haman signed it, and Mordechai parnes osov eschelo. So this medrash says, even Shaya Aman Avda Shel Mordechai lo haya noel lo l'klal likro lo Aman. This explains one of the reasons why Mordechai didn't want to bow down. Haman is his eved. Why should I'm not going to bow down to my eved.
On the other hand, it explains why Haman had a visceral hatred for Mordechai.
Okay. Good point.
Ernie, just on the end of the Pasuk, it says right? So at the beginning, so the Midrash says that Esther asked Achashverosh himself to free Mordechai from bowing down. Okay? And Rabbi Yonatan or Avishitz infers that the explanation from this verse itself, the words Ki kain siva hamelech. If you look, Ki kain siva hamelech, u'Mordechai lo yachriya ishtachaveh. You learn out from that the melech was mitzuvah, that Mordechai should not bow down. He learns it out that way.
Mm-hmm. I hear. So the Sfas Emes says that Haman knew all along that Mordechai is not going to bow. And therefore, Haman was the one who instigated Achashverosh to enact the law requiring everyone to bow to him. He knew that Mordechai would be disobeying a royal decree, which would be a felony, which then he would be able to, both kill Mordechai and eventually extended it to the Jewish people.
Yeah, but he learns from the Midrash, and if you look in the Pasuk, the pasuk seem, if you learn it carefully, if you say it carefully, so what is it referring to? Is it referring to Mordechai doesn't have to bow down, or that everybody has to bow down?
Everyone had to bow down to Haman.
So no, because ki kain siva hamelech uMordechai lo ki kain siva hamelech.
Yes,
And therefore Mordechai didn't have to bow down to him.
Right, you're bringing Rav Yonason Eibshitz Einachanamis brings that at the request of Queen Esther,
right,
Achashverosh said Mordechai doesn't have to do.
But he brings it from a midrash.
Yeah.
But there's another interpretation that says Mordechai didn't bow down because he recognized that he's bowing down to Avodah Zarah because of what he was wearing. And that's
Okay,
Yehareg Ve'al Yavor. So, but he was also trying to make up for the sin of the rest of Bnei Israel who lived in Shushan who did bow down. So he's trying to do that in order to be a fine favor in God's eyes for the people who did bow down.
Exactly. So many the Meforshim explain that Mordechai is putting the people into great danger by not bowing down. Why didn't he calculate that? So an Adam Gadol, they bring the Rambam, who says that an Adam Gadol v'chasid yirei shamayim v'roeh shador parts b'kach r'shai l'kadesh es Hashem u'lemoiser atzma fil al mitzvah kala. You can be moiser nefesh. Normally, you only do it for the gimel averis, but even on the mitzvah kala, you could violate, because as Bernie says, they were already problematic with bowing down to the tzelem of Nebuchadnezzar. So here there was a concept to be moiser nefesh, not to bow down.
What about Mishum Eva?
Go ahead. What do you mean?
You're endangering everybody. It's a mitzvah kala, but you're endangering every single person that's there.
That's why we're going to see the Jews came to Mordechai with a taina. Why? Go ahead and bow down. Why are you putting us into a sakana?
Yeah, that's what. Okay.
So there was a taina.
We learn it as a halacha for many things when you're in the gola and when you need to agree with the goyim. So we learn mishum eva. I mean, we learn it.
Like normally a doctor not allowed to treat a non-Jewish person on Shabbat.
Right.
But we do it mishum eva because they could create a riot against us.
But that was going to happen here too. Mm-hmm. But I guess you're not mishtachaveh to Avodah Zarah, so that's why. That's more chamur over here.
But by the way, Klal Yisrael was also bowing down to Haman.
Yeah.
So there was a kitru
that,
like what Bernie said in the previous generation, that they bowed down to it. Something they're doing again. They didn't learn their lesson.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. So let's continue. Pasuk Gimel. Vayomru avdei hamelech asher b'shal hamelech l'Mordechai. So the other courtiers in the court say to Mordechai, "Madu ato over eis mitzvas hamelech? Why are you not?" I mean, they didn't know he was Jewish. First, they thought he was a non-Jew. Then he told them he was Jewish, so they hated him, and this was all reported to Haman by them. That these courtiers also didn't like bowing down, and they wanted like a test case. They sort of created Mordechai as a test case to report that Mordechai is newly doing what is maybe Mordechai's actions of not bowing down would be tolerated by Haman, because they didn't want to do it either. I mean, Amlois brings that. But Mordechai's explanation to them is that as a Jew, he would be incapable of ever bowing down in an idolatrous way.
So then there's a discussion why they say if a Jew's not allowed to bow down to a guy, how come Yaakov bowed down to Esav? Are you going to be discussing that at all? Do you see that there?
Go ahead, Bernie, go ahead. Yeah,
So
I have it.
basically, the Mam, let me see who the commentator is. 24. Okay. But anyway, he goes on to say that, yeah, it's true that Yaakov bowed down to Esav, but Esav did not, number one, did not have an idol dangling from his neck. And number two, remember Mordechai was a descendant of Binyamin. Binyamin at that point had not yet been born. So therefore, he was not um, therefore, he did. It wasn't Binyamin who bowed down to Esav the way Yaakov and I assume his other children had.
Right?
Yeah,
Like
but it's crazy, but he bowed down 7 times. He didn't bow down at once.
well, I have a nice medrash here. Well, it comes in the next pasuk. We'll see, and you'll see about the numbers of bowing. Pasuk Dalid Vayehi Be'amram elav yom vayom Vayehi Ke amram elav yom vayom. Those of you who follow the Megillah Bal Koirei, these are one of the psukim where there's a Kriyan Ksiv. And we've always been taught when it comes to the Megillah, we mention both. That means in places where there's a mamish a Kriyan Ksiv, you read it not the way it's written. But in the Megillah, we mention both. Vayhi ba'amram elav yom vayom with a beis, and we say ka'amram elav yom vayom with a kaf. That every day, the servants are telling Mordechai, why aren't you buying down? V'lo shama lehem, v'agidu la'aman, and finally they told Haman li rosei amdu divrei Mordechai, this is this thing about maybe a test case. Are the words of Mordechai going to stand? Ki gid lehem asher hu Yehudi, he told them he was Jewish. Now, the Chomas Onech brings, I'm sorry, not the Chomas Onech, the Minchas Shai like this. Be'omram Kri, Ksiv in Beis. It's written with a Beis, Be'omram. Ukri in Kaf, we read it with a Kaf. The Huchad min Milin, the Ksiv in Beis, V'karin in Kaf. There are other places in Tanakh where it's written Beis, we read it Kaf. The Simanim Sarbe Mesrog Gedola Marechas Osa Beis, V'reish Oshia, V'reish Raisi Midrash Echad Kasub Lashon Hazeh. Ksiv ba'amram, Kri, Omer Haman LaMordechai, Lama encha korei mishtachaveli? Why are you not buying down? V'chi gadol ata miYaakov ziknecha shishtachavuhu u'beiso le'esav zikni kaf beis hishtachavos. Are you any greater than your grandfather Yaakov, who bowed down 22 times? What's the 22 times? Arba noshav, right? 4 wives. Achadasar Yiladav, like Bernie said, there is no Binyamin, there's 11 children. So 4 plus 11 is 15. Achas l'chol echad mehem arei tezvav. V'hu sheva pamim. Yaakov himself, if you look in the pasuk, bowed down 7 times. Harei chav beis. So that's the remez of be'amram ke'amram. Chav beis is 22. Right? Mordechai answered, Binyamin lo nolad ba'esav, lo ishtachavo ad kan. So it's a beautiful medrash that Bernie brought, but that's the source itself. Pasuk hey. Vayar Haman kien Mordechai koreo mishtachavelo. Haman sees that Mordechai is not bowing down. Vayimalei Haman chema. Haman is filled with anger. I wanted to say something about chema. 1 second. No business. Chema, from the word cham, it's such a severe kas that it actually heats the person up. Pasuk
Only the Alshuch even says that even Haman took off the Avodah Zorah,
And he still didn't bow.
he still didn't bow. That's important because we said he's bowing down to the Avodah Zorah, but it's not. He took it off and he still wouldn't bow down to him. So that made him more angry.
Because of the pshat that, remember, Haman himself made himself like an Elohah, like he made himself like a false god. So even without wearing the getchka, he felt he couldn't bow down to him because Haman is treating himself as mamash and avodah zarah. Pasuk vav vayivez beinav lishloach yad b'Mordechai levado. It wasn't enough for Haman to just strike out at Mordechai. Ki higiru lo es am Mordechai. They had revealed to Haman that Mordechai is Jewish. Vayvakesh Haman lashmid et kol Yehudim asher b'chol malchut Achashverosh am Mordechai. So this is anti-Semitism, right? Anti-Semites throughout the ages, they're upset by one Jew, but they include everybody into the picture. It's true racism. And it's when it's basically when Haman found out that this is he's not bowing down on religious grounds. So now he wants to take revenge upon him as a Jew as well, because it's part of his religious beliefs. The Gemara Megillah says, first Mordechai levado, then Mordechai. Who are they? These are all the Klal Yisrael, the Jews. Now, Haman thought that maybe the king is not going to agree to kill Mordechai. Mordechai had saved the king's life from Bigsan Viserys. On the other hand, we know Achashverosh was a terrible anti-Semite. And Haman knew this. So by making a gzeir against all the Jews, and then once he gets the king to agree, Mordechai is going to get killed as part of the general decree against the Jews. So that's a very good shot, I think. The Gemara basically is like this: Omer Rava Batchila, Bike Shaman Lishloch Gab Mordechai Levado, Ulvasof Ba'am Mordechai, Umanu Rabbanon. First, he was really going after the Chachamim. Ulvasof B'chol HaYehudim. Because remember, Mordechai was one of the Talmidei Chachamim in the Sanhedrin. Pasuk Zion. B'chodesh Harishon, u'chodesh Nisan, b'shnat shtem esrei lemelech Achashverosh. So again, this is the 12th year. Remember, Esther is get married in the 7th year. 5 years have gone by. This is in Nisan. We're going to see this is the 13th day of Nisan. Says Seder Olam. On that day, he pilled poor. He threw lots. Poor is like dice in Persia. Hu agaral lifnei Haman. Now, what is he doing? Dot miyom liyom umechodesh lechodesh. He went through every day from Yud Gimel Nisan, which is the first of the month, lechodesh nemasar chodesh Adar, from month to month, day to day, to find out what is the most auspicious day in order to take revenge against the Jews. The first time the poor came up, it came up Yud Daled Nisan. But that's not good because the Jewish people were saved on Yud Daled Nisan. He knew that historically. So he went until eventually it landed on Yud Gimel Adar. And there's a famous Gemara, which we're going to learn. Ton Rabbanon. Be'echad b'Nisan Rosh Hashanah Chadosh Minolan. First of all, how do you know that Nisan is a Rosh Chodesh, is the first month of the year? Ravashi Arameach, he will pour who are Garal of the Aman. Well, if Adar is the 12th month, Nisan is the first month. Because remember, the Torah never refers to the months by the Persian names. In the Torah, it says B'chodesh HaRishon, B'chodesh HaSheni. So here's the first evidence that Nisan is the first month. So the Gemara goes like this: Tana, Kivan Shenafel Pur B'chodesh Adar, Samach Simcha Gedoyla. When Haman saw that it came into the month of Adar, he was happy. Omar, Nafali Pur B'Yerach Shemeis B'Moshe. Moshe Rabbeinu dies when? Zayin Adar. Umazalo Rali Yisrael. This is a bad month for Klal Yisrael because he knew that Moshe Rabbeinu was the giver of the Torah, was their leader. However, Lo Haya Yodea Shebeshiva B'Adar Meis Uv'Shiva B'Adar Noilad. We know that Moshe Rabbeinu, when he lived 120 years, he lived 120 years Molei. He was born on the 7th of Adar as well. Ulefichach ein mazalo shel Adar. The month of Adar is a good month. We know Mishenichlas Adar Marbim B'Simcha. By the way, the Gemara says Osir Shana Haisamu Beres. It was a leap year, and they added an extra month because it says Miyom Liyom Umechodesh LeChodesh. Lama Li Chodesh Adar Rekva Omar LeChodesh Nemasar. We know it, so it had to say it because it was a 13th month year that year. By the way, this very important Seder Olam says like this: B'Yud Gimel B'Nisan Kosav Hominas Asforim Lahashmid Laharog. The letters that went out to kill the Jewish people was written on the 13th of Nisan. B'Tesvav B'Nisan Nichnasa Esther Lifnei HaMelech. The whole scene where Esther gets permission to go into Achashverosh, that's on the 15th day of Nisan, that was Pesach. And B'Tes Zayin B'Nisan Tolu is Haman. And Haman is hanged the next day. So the whole story of Purim takes place on 3 days. Yud Gimel Nisan, Tesvav Nisan, and he's hanged the next day. Let's weiter.
Just an interesting addition. This, according to the minhag in Sfard, not Sfard, the Eastern, Sfarad, that there is a minhag when because Moshe died on the 7th day. He was born and died on the 7th day of Adar. There's a minhag among Sfardim to fast for a week's time on that day, or to fast because it's the anniversary of Moshe Rabbeinu's death. But obviously, the minhag is not among Ashkenazi Jew, but
Interesting.
it's a minhag.
Okay. So Pasuk Ches, an important Pasuk. Vayomer Haman lemelech Achashverosh. Yeshno Am Echad. Now Haman reveals to Achashverosh what he wants to do. There is a people, mefuzar, scattered, umuforad, and dispersed, bein ha'amim, b'chol medinos machusecha, in all your provinces. V'dasehem, their laws are different, shonos mikolam. V'esdosei hamelech einam osim, they're not following your laws. V'lamelech ein shovel lanicham, you, the king, should not tolerate them anymore. I want to read the famous Gemara. Gemara Megillah Yud Gimel Yomid Beis. Amar Rava. Leka de Yada L'Sapra Al Yisrael Lishna Bisha Kahaman. There was never a person in history that said Lashon Hara so bad against the Jewish people like Haman. Amar Le. Haman says to Achashverosh, Ta Nichlinu. Haman says, let's destroy the Jewish people. Amar Le Mistafina. Me Elohav. So Achashverosh says to Haman, I'm afraid of their God. Dulola Avid bi kida Avid b'kamoy. I'm afraid that their God will do to me what they did to Paro and Sancheriv. Right? Paro his whole nation was drowned in the Yam Suf, and Sancheriv, they were destroyed that one night. Amar le yashnu min mitzvos. That, you see what's going on, what the Gemara is doing? The word yeshno am echad, they're changing it to say yashnu min mitzvos. They're sleeping regarding mitzvos. They're not Mekayim mitzvahs anymore. So answered Achashverosh, Amar le Isbun Rabbanon. But they have Chachamim that are Mekayim the mitzvahs. Amar le Am Echad Hein. No, they're all not Mekayim the mitzvahs. Shema Tomer Korchani Oisebe Malchuscha. If you wipe out a nation among your people, there's going to be a bald spot. There's going to be a lacuna, a vacuum. So you don't have to worry about that because mefuzarin hein bein ha'amim. They're scattered. They're not like in one province, they are there, and if you get rid of them, the province is not going to work. They're scattered among many people. Shema toimar is hanar minayu, but people, your citizens are benefiting from them. No. Miforad, kifreda zu anoletis misusu chamor. They don't intermingle with other people. They're like a mule who is sterile that is produced by the mating of a horse and a donkey. She'ena osa peris. A mule is not productive. V'shem atomer ike medinasa minayu. Maybe they are one of the provinces, and you don't want to destroy all province. Talmud Lamar, they're not in any individual province; they're scattered everywhere. So Haman is a real anti-Semite. He has an answer to everything that Achashverosh, as the head of the government, he's concerned about politics. Haman has all the answers. And he didn't have to go too far, the Megillah Storm says, because Achashverosh, we've pointed out many times, was a great hater of Jews. He just had other problems. He was afraid of their God, and he knew they had zechuyos. But Haman responded to all of that. The V'daseim Shonos, they don't eat our food, and they don't intermarry with us. He said like this: they eat, they drink, and they despise the throne. If a fly falls into a Jew's cup, he throws out the fly and drinks the wine. But if His Majesty were to touch his cup, he would throw it to the nut from it because of Yasach. So Haman knew everything about Yiddishkeit. And many of our anti-Semitic progenitors, Jules Streicher, who was the editor of the Der Strumer, the Nazi propaganda organ, knew everything about Yiddishkeit. They had studied it. They were creating a museum in Prague. They were gathering all the artifacts. In fact, in October 1946, the 11 Nazi Nuremberg criminals that were adjudicated to be hung were supposed to be 12, but Göring took cyanide that morning. I had a professor, I don't remember his name. He was from Columbia University. He was a visiting professor who came, and he was on rounds with me, and my students. I was chief resident then, and he handed me a bullet, and the bullet was an empty cartridge. And he said this was the cartridge that they smuggled in cyanide. He was a doctor in Nuremberg, because when I met him, it was 1987. He must have been 85 years old. This, I think, was John Benjamin or John Latimer. It was a famous urologist from Columbia. And he was a doctor working there, and he was called to help resuscitate Göring. And he found that bullet in the cell, and he kept it as a souvenir. I held that bullet. I remember I passed it around to all the, why am I bringing this? Because, so Jules Streicher was one of the 11 hung. Right before he was hung, he said, Purim Fest, 1946.
It was John Latimer. I looked it up. It was John Latimer.
John Latimer, okay.
Yeah.
So where did you look it up?
Wikipedia, I just typed his name in.
And it says about the Göring?
Yeah, U.S. Army Doctor, World War II biography of Nazi leaders. Yeah. He wrote a book about it.
He became a urologist.
Yeah, he was handed Nuremberg prison to view Göring's body just after Göring had committed suicide in his prison cell by biting a cyanide capsule, which Ernie Agustin actually touched.
No. By the way, John Latimer, he was a very interesting character. You'll see about him. He tried to make a lot of comparisons between John F. Kennedy's assassination and Abraham Lincoln. And I remember the lecture he gave at Harvard when he was a visiting professor was all about that. They had brought, it was a whole lecture about Kennedy and Lincoln. He was interested in this history. Anyways, I remember holding that cartridge. But what am I saying about Purim Fest 1946?
They were educated.
Well, Streicher looked around. There were Haman was hung with 10 sons. So Streicher understood there's 11 people being hung. He said Purim Fest. You understand? They knew Yiddishkeit. So that's that. I think it's a point to conclude here that you see Haman was a true anti-Semite, like Jules Streicher, where they had studied Yiddishkeit, so he knew how to really say vicious lashon hara against us to get Achashverosh to agree to doing this. Okay. By the way, we had a lot of great contributions by everyone. I encourage everybody else to do so.
The question, how could they not have figured that she was Jewish? She brought this Mordechai to the court. I mean, how did they not figure that out?
Well, why? What do you mean?
Because Mordechai came with her. Well, he was there before.
No. Remember, we learned last week. She suggests, we learned one medrash that said she recommended him.
Okay.
But so what? I mean, they had nothing to do with each other. We see that her secret was kept for these 5 years. How they did it, must have been very. But
obviously,
but maybe he had 1,000 wives. You don't see the wife. Maybe it was a way for them to interact with each other because it's so many wives that maybe it was not that difficult.
And usually servants talk. If you want to know what goes in someone's house, ask the servants.
Like upstairs, downstairs.
Yeah.
Like upstairs, downstairs, Downton Abbey.
Ernie, you know where John Latimer died? What city he died in? Teaneck.
Really? So John Latimer lived in. Well, it doesn't surprise me because a lot of
you had a lot to do with him, Ernie.
No, a lot of professors Columbia lived there. It was a nice place to live. Interesting. Yeah. John Latimer was a famous urologist from Columbia. Okay. Very good. Again, I encourage all the research you guys are doing. Please do it, and please feel free to contribute because it makes this year better.
Okay.
Shabbat tov, everybody.
Shabbat tov, everybody.
Okay. Now, what am I gonna?